Good afternoon, everyone. Anybody not ready? I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and with me is St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. This is a Pinellas County Use of Deadly Force Task Force investigation. We're going to identify for you the people involved and then run through the facts, what happened. We'll have some body-worn camera and dash camera video to show you as well. The involved people in this case are Jermaine Small. It's Germaine. His date of birth is 3/8/96. He's 28 years old, and he is the arrested suspect in the case. It involved an officer-involved shooting by a member of the St. Petersburg Police Department, and the officer who fired his weapon is Officer Andre Sousa, S-O-U-S-A. And the other officer involved is Officer Dale Johnson, both patrol officers with St. Pete PD. We have three locations that are involved here. The first is the Shady Side Food Mart, and that's located at 4200 15th Avenue South in St. Petersburg. We also have a residence that's located in the 1600 block of 42nd Street South, which is about a block south of this Shady Side Food Mart. And there's an open lot, which is where the officer-involved shooting occurred, and that's at 1711 40th Street South. The weapon that's involved in this was the weapon carried by Small, and that's a Glock 43X 9mm handgun with a 50-round drum magazine. And that's the gun that's here to my right and to your left, a photograph of it. So on Saturday, this past Saturday, March 30th, at about 5:32 p.m., the St. Petersburg Police Department received a call of shots fired at the Shady Side Food Mart, again located at 4200 15th Avenue South. A citizen was in the parking lot of the food mart and saw a gray, newer model Honda Accord. And that's the vehicle, and I'll explain why we have the photograph of it. That's the vehicle to my left up here and to your far right. Saw that Honda Accord stopped in the driveway of the access area to the food mart, and an occupant of the car, and I'll show you the video, appeared to be engaged in some sort of a dialogue or some sort of a conversation with Jermaine Small, who was standing on the sidewalk and on the passenger side of that car at the entrance to the food mart off 15th Avenue South. The caller, who happened to be in the parking lot, called and stated that Small fired one round from a handgun into that car. That car, the Honda Accord, then rapidly fled. As you can hear, and you'll see it in the video, the tires squeal, and as soon as the shots fired, fled south through the parking lot and out of the area. After Small fired at the car, he then went south on 42nd Street from the food mart. And as you can see, from point of reference here, this map that we have, again, to my left and to your right, you see 15th Avenue South, and the Shady Side Food Mart's up there at the top. And when Small left the Shady Side Food Mart, he went south to that residence that's in the 1600 block of 16th Avenue South. So as I said, Small walked south on 42nd Street from the food mart, and the caller who had called this thing in, he left the area. The caller doesn't know Small, never seen that car before, doesn't know anybody in that car. He was just a citizen in the area who called this thing in. And as I said, the meeting between Small and the Honda is captured on video through the store's camera and also audio of the gunshot. The store had a second camera system that captured Small walking, again, west on 15th Avenue just before the shooting, and it appears that he had the gun in his shorts. So this is a pretty big gun with the 50-round drum on it. I mean, the gun itself is a 9mm, it's a 43X, it's a relatively compact gun. But with that 50-round magazine drum on it, it's pretty big, but you can kind of see the bulge in his pants as he's walking down the street. Again, I'll play videos of all that for you in a second. So, as I said, the video from the food mart showed that Small left, and he went south on 42nd Street. And when he was walking south on 42nd Street, he had his shirt off, and it appears that he had the gun wrapped in the shirt as he was walking south. When he got in front of a residence about a block south of the food mart, he saw a 70-year-old male who was in the front yard of his home. Now, this male who lives there at the residence is partially blind. I'm not going to identify him because this is just a guy who was in his front yard minding his own business. It really doesn't have any materiality as to who he is. He's just an innocent victim of this thing who Small tried to kill. Small called the man twice by saying, and I quote, hey man, and according to the victim and also a neighbor, Small was trying to get the man's attention. And as Small was calling out to him, saying, hey man, getting his attention, he fired 2 rounds from his gun at the man, and the man ran into his home. There were 2 shell casings from that gun and 2 bullets that were fired, and they were recovered at that location. The resident of that home and his neighbor, neither of them know Small, have any idea why he shot at the man, and again, that's why I'm not identifying him. Small then walked, after he shot at the guy who was in his yard, minding his own business. He walked south, and then he walked east on 15th Avenue South. I'm sorry, on 17th Avenue South. So he comes south on 42nd Street and gets down to 17th Avenue South, and he walks eastbound. At that point, as he's walking eastbound, Officer Johnson was also south because he had been up there at the Food Mart. There was a description given out of Small. He was looking for him in the area. And as Small walked east on 17th Avenue South, Officer Johnson saw him ahead. And Small, as he's walking, went to 40th Street, which is where the dots end over there on your far right. And he went south on 40th Street. Officer Johnson took up a position at the intersection of 17th Avenue South and 40th Street. As Small goes south on 40th Street, he veers up into a yard, and a citizen saw Small in the yard and saw that he had a gun in his hand. The citizen also had seen the officers in the area, and she yelled out to Small, telling him that he needed to give himself up and that there wasn't going to be a shooting in her neighborhood. Well, Small didn't listen, and he continued to walk through the open lot and walked northwest into the open lot at 1711 40th Street South. So you can see where those dotted lines are, and here, and Small circled back into that open lot. So at that point, Officer Johnson was at the intersection of 17th Avenue South and 40th Street. He's parked facing south. Small had walked into the yard, had the gun in his hand. The woman told him basically, get out of here, don't do that in my neighborhood. And he continued to walk in a northwest direction back towards 17th Avenue South. And that's where Officer Sousa was also eastbound on 40th Street. I'm sorry, he was eastbound on 17th Avenue South when he saw Small in the open lot. So Officer Sousa pulls into the open lot, and he saw Small saw him, and at that point, Small ran, and he pointed his gun at Officer Sousa. And that was seen by Officer Sousa, and it was also seen by that citizen witness who had engaged him and told him to get out of there, and it's also captured on Officer Sousa's body-worn camera. Sousa continued to run south behind the house, where he fired another round from the gun, and then around the east side of the house and back to the front at a residence at 1719 40th Street South. So as Officer Sousa pulls in the lot, Small runs south, he runs east, and he appears back at the front of the house again. And at that point, Officer Sousa could see that Small had the same gun in his hand, and that's where Officer Sousa engaged him, and Officer Sousa fired 13 rounds from his gun at Small. He struck him one time in the head area. It was not a penetrating wound, but he was struck and he was bleeding. Officer Sousa was about 30 feet away from Small when he fired. At that point, Officer Sousa is closing distance between himself and Small. Small begins to run. He drops his gun in the driveway before he gets to 40th Street. He then runs across 40th Street where Officer Thompson and Officer Sousa took him into custody. From the time that Small first shot into the Honda Accord at the Shady Side Food Mart at 15th Avenue South and 42nd Street until the time he shot at Officer Sousa in that vacant lot was about 6 minutes. So all of this transpired very fast. At this point, what we're going to do, and I have some more comments, and I'll take any questions you have. At this point, though, we'll play the videos for you. And where the videos are going to begin is what happened captured by the 2 video cameras at the Shady Side Food Mart, again, at 42nd Street and 15th Avenue South with the car. And then what you'll see next is the dash camera and the body-worn camera from Officer Sousa. So go ahead. That's Small walking right there. You can see him with the shirt over his shoulder. That's Small. That's the Honda Accord that pulls in. You can see they got his attention. He's coming back. Okay, go ahead and stop it. Yeah, okay. So you see Small, he's walking westbound, the Honda Accord pulls in, he turns around, engages, you hear the gunshot, the Honda Accord hauls out of there southbound, and Small then walks along the east side of the convenience store, the food mart, the Shady Side Food Mart, walks south about a block. That's when he shoots into, or shoots at the man who was in his yard, fires 2 rounds there. After he fires at him, he continues walking south, and that's when he makes the east turn, the east walking turn on 17th Avenue South. So what you see here is Officer Thompson's cruiser at 40th Street and 17th Avenue South. And where you see Officer Thompson's cruiser is from the dash camera of Officer Sousa's cruiser. So the vacant lot is up there to the right by the phone pole, and you'll see it pop up as she begins this again. You'll be able to see to the right where Thompson saw Small walk to the south, came through the yard where the woman saw him, and you'll see in there, you'll see where Small is walking towards 17th Avenue South, and that's where Officer Sousa sees him, and then the rest of it unfolds. So go ahead, Amanda. There's Small right there. Yeah, go ahead and stop it. Okay, so this is all dash camera video, and you can see where he turns around and he points the gun at Officer Sousa. And when there, he also turns back again and points the gun more at him when he's running. He runs south, he comes out to the east. The next thing you're going to see is it transitions from the dash camera to Officer Sousa's body-worn camera, and you'll hear the shots fired, and it all transpires from there. Okay, go ahead.
Shots fired, shots fired. Blind male, he's got a gun in his hand, he's in between the block. Lock it up, guys. Shot fired.
That's where he pops out over there.
Shot fired, shot back down. Get in and out again, Anthony. We are good. We are good. Suspect down. Yeah. I'm gonna help him. Put your hand behind your back. Hand behind your back. Don't move.
So you can see when Small pops out again, he still has the gun in his hand. Officer Sousa sees it. So he decides to fire because he had already fired at the car at the food mart. He had already shot the citizen in his yard. He had already pointed a gun at Officer Sousa, fired at Officer Sousa, and now the guy's popping out again and he's running towards where Officer Johnson was. So this is really textbook, and Officer Sousa and Officer Johnson did a great job with this. And you can see where Officer Sousa actually transitions from his firearm to his taser, where Officer Johnson still has his firearm out, because when Sousa saw that he had dropped the gun in the driveway, so before he crosses the street, he drops the gun. So he knows he no longer has the gun, he's no longer a threat. So he appropriately transitions to less lethal force, where Johnson still has his gun out in case he had a secondary firearm, etc. And then they took him into custody. So they're really textbook, and it goes as a credit to the training that they received by the St. Petersburg Police Department and how they handled themselves in this and taking the guy into custody. So they both did a great job, and thankfully neither one of them were injured. So Small was taken to the hospital where he remained until yesterday when he was released, and transported to the county jail. Small's injuries are not life-threatening. He's been charged with one count of attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, one attempted first-degree murder for the man that was in his yard, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. In that Glock with a 50-round drum, Small had 22 rounds of ammunition left. They were all a mix-match type of rounds, which is consistent with what we see with crime guns, and that's guns that are bought on the street and ammo that just hodgepodge together and throw into these things. That's not normal. It's not the way people do it. They usually go buy a box of rounds someplace and that's what they have. But when you have these crime guns that are floating around on the street like this, they just throw whatever they can get in them, and that's what happens. Now, I'm sure, there's no doubt in my mind that that gun was stolen, but I can't tell you from where because it's not listed in any of the databases we have. But that just means that somebody didn't report it, or when they did report it, they didn't have a serial number. But there's no doubt that that's a stolen gun, and that's how he got his hands on it. We don't know of any motive that Small had for trying to kill that man in his front yard on 42nd Street. And really, it just appears to be a random act of violence. And so we're very thankful that that citizen who was out doing yard work, 70 years old, partially blind guy, minding his own business, that Small wasn't a good shot, because that could have been a real tragedy in that random act of violence. We also don't know why he shot into the car at the Shady Side Food Mart. We have, as I said, have not been able to identify who owns the car or who was in it at the time. The photograph is here. There are some distinctions with that car. It is a newer model, gray Honda Accord. It has a black antenna on the top, and it has pretty distinctive wheels. So if anybody knows who was in that car or who owns that car, as it was seen about 5:30 p.m. This past Saturday at the Shady Side Food Mart at 42nd Street and 15th Avenue South. We'll have our public information office give you all some points of contact, and we ask that you put that out and ask anybody who knows whose car that is or who is in that car on Saturday at 5:30 at the Shady Side that they call and let us know who that person or those people are. Now, here's one of the head scratchers in this thing, and something we see way too often, and the recidivism, and these people just don't learn, they don't get it, they don't learn their lesson. Small has an extensive criminal history. He was released from the Florida Department of Corrections on March 2nd of 2024 after serving 9 years in state prison for 2 counts of armed robbery with a firearm. He has 9 prior felony charges, including grand theft auto, grand theft of a gun, armed burglary, possession of drugs, battery on a school board employee, resisting arrest, and violation of probation. Because of Small's criminal record and having been released from the Florida Department of Corrections only 28 days before he tried to murder 2 people, including a police officer, with this 9mm handgun with a 50-round magazine, he faces mandatory life in prison with no opportunity for release under Florida's Prison Releasee Reoffender Law, or as it's called, the PRR law. So to sum this up, in about 6 minutes on Saturday evening in St. Petersburg, a felon who was released from state prison 28 days prior, after serving 9 years for armed robbery, had a 9mm handgun with a 50-round drum magazine that he used to shoot into an occupied car, tried to kill an innocent citizen, and tried to kill a police officer. So the good news, after saying all that, is that because he is a PRR reoffender, is that Small will never be on the streets again, and at 28 years old will spend the rest of his life in the Florida Department of Corrections. So happy to answer any questions you have. I don't know if Chief Holloway wants to make any comments, but either one of us are available to answer any questions that you have.
Sheriff, you said this was a textbook case. Let me just cross the T here. You investigated this because of all St. Petersburg police. Did you see anything that would have, said this wasn't a justifiable shooting, or did you find this was a justifiable?
Well, it's still an investigation. I can tell you that, of course, I was out there at the scene on Saturday. I've been working with our investigators over the last couple of days, and everything that I see here, it's absolutely a justified shooting, and they did everything as well as it could be done, and I see no issues or problems with it at all.
Chief, may I ask you about the way your officers performed here? Because, I'm just layman, but I look at this incredible video from the body camera, and when I see the suspect, Mr. Small, laying in the small area between the house and the fence, I can't see his left hand. I see his right hand out, but they don't know if he's still armed, and yet they showed restraint. What did you think of that?
I think like the sheriff said, the officers did an outstanding job. Officer Sousa, as you can see, he saw that when he saw the subject didn't have a weapon. He transitioned to his taser, but the other officer did not. So you're right, he wasn't sure if he still had a weapon or not. So what we'll do is after the sheriff's investigation, we'll look to see if they violate any policy procedures, and that'll be the second part of the investigation. But I want to thank the sheriff for a couple of years ago when we started this violent crime task force. A lot of people say, maybe you shouldn't do this, but it really shows our city, our county transparency that, here's a St. Pete officer that's involved in it, but the sheriff's office, the one that's investigating it, and then so it does work.
Do either one of you know what the interaction might have been between the Honda Accord and Mr. Small? I mean, what was that about? And is there a possibility there's another victim here who was shot?
Yeah, and there's a very real possibility. I can tell you that, we've been aware of that and astute about that, is that there very easily could have been, but there's no reports of it. I mean, St. Pete didn't have any reports. The hospitals haven't reported anything. Could be that there's something out there that we don't know about because he fired. And, did he hit somebody in that car? The first part of your question, no, we don't know, what it was about. I mean, I think that we could say definitively he was walking westbound, somebody got his attention. I mean, that's clear. He turned around and he was engaged in the car, and next thing you know is you hear the shot pop. So something happened there between them. Nobody there at the scene heard anything. The citizen who called in just saw the engagement and saw the gun being fired, saw Small firing it, and heard the round, and then he got out of there. So we don't know, and that's one of the reasons why we like to try and find those people and find out what happened. And there's some victim of something in that car, but hopefully they're not shot.
Sure. Can you clarify the point when Mr. Small fires at the officer? Is it in that section between the dash cam and the body cam?
It is. It is. And so, as you can see, where Small turns around, right, and he points the gun at the officer clearly, and then he continues to run. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that Small turns again. Now, he doesn't turn the whole way, but he turns again, and you can kind of see the gun coming around, but then he keeps running. And it's probably a couple seconds after that is that he fires again at the officer. That's when the officer, and you can hear when it transitions from the dash cam to the body worn camera, you'll hear two beeps that come on, and it's right at those beeps you hear the gunshot. So the officer hears it, he calls out shots fired. You can hear it on the BWC, and the citizen witness said that she also heard it, and the citizen witness also saw Small point the gun at the officer. So it's all happening very fast, but it's right there behind the house. So he fires at the officer, and then he keeps running, and then he makes that eastbound turn where he pops out in front. So that's what happened.
Sheriff, once we possibly identify, whoever was in this car and that specifically? Because right now, obviously, he doesn't have any to fire into the car.
So, again, we don't know. What charges could Small face for firing into that car? Well, if nothing else, it's shooting into an occupied vehicle, okay, which you can't shoot into an occupied car. You could have anything. You could have that. You could have an aggravated assault. You could have an attempted murder. Or, to this point is, somebody could have been hurt and hit in there. You could have an aggravated battery. You could have, again, an attempted murder. Or, it could be worse. Somebody could be dead. I don't know, because I don't have a crystal ball on that. He shot. There's no question about it. And that car, as you saw, fled. Beyond that, I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities.
What was it like for you to see this all play out and see how your officers responded in that moment in time you tracked them down?
Yeah, like I said, we train a lot, and they also did exactly what they're supposed to do. You were, they're very close. Something could have happened to those officers that day. Small had a game plan. The officers also had a plan, and thank God the officers were trained just a little bit better.
Sheriff, when you look at all the gunfire in such a densely populated area, how fortunate is it that no one was seriously hurt or killed?
And just to follow up on that question, have you accounted for the other 12 rounds that were fired by the officer?
Yeah, so so you got two things at play here. One is obviously it's very concerning. When you have the type of Pinellas County is the most densely populated county in the state of Florida, and you see gun violence like this in an urban area, in a densely populated area, very concerning to anybody and everybody. And you saw people, and some people ran. They saw him walking down the street with a gun. This could have been, of course, exponentially worse, and you could have had a lot of dead bodies here because this guy was on a crime spree of violence. And the real scary part is when it's random violence, because that's just when innocent people are at risk and at peril because of a guy who, I don't even know what to say about it. It almost makes you speechless. Come on, you did 9 years in state prison for 2 counts of armed robbery with a gun, and 28 days later you got that gun with a 50-round magazine and you're out shooting at people and shooting at cops and trying to kill cops. It's very dangerous. And as we said recently a few times, we see an uptick of gun violence in Pinellas County. And we're going to do everything we can. We all collectively work very well together. It's all, we're separate agencies, but in some respects we're all the same. We're all one agency. We're all working together collaboratively and collectively between all the police departments and the sheriff's office. And we're tamping this down. We're going to push it back, and we're going to do everything we can to see that people like him don't hurt anybody. But it's very concerning and again, frustrating that a guy who goes away for 9 years gets out immediately, and does that. So, what was your question again?
Sorry, but more closely related, but with the officers' bullets that were fired.
Yeah. So
13 rounds,
right.
that's true.
So he fired. So you got two things in play, just so everybody's clear who's listening or watching. You got two things in play. You got shell casings, which are the casings of the bullet, and those are the things that pop out of the gun you find on the ground. And so we were able to recover 11 of 13 of those because it's a sand lot out there, and our forensics people spent 2 days out there, hours and hours and hours, and some of it we couldn't find. And we did collect the majority of the bullets, but we didn't collect all of them. So, where do they end up? It could be a myriad of things. They could be sitting in a tree someplace. They could have fragmented where they hit the ground and they broke up, and you'll never recover them. But good news is that, because we did canvass the entire area, is that nobody else other than Small was hit by the gunfire.
And those homes that were so close, it wasn't in someone's home.
Well, we can't find them if they are, so we tried. So we looked out there. But the good news is they didn't hit anybody.
And then Sheriff, with Small being released from prison just a few days prior to this happening, do we know what his connection was to St. Pete? Did he have a St. Pete address? Was he at a halfway house in St. Pete? Did he have family in the area?
So he was not released from the Florida Department of Corrections on any type of supervised release. So he did his time, and he was a straight release from state prison. So he lived in St. Petersburg. He was sentenced from Pinellas County. The robbery he did back in 2014 that he was sentenced for in 2015 was on the Pinellas Trail with a firearm of 2 people. So he lives, not anymore, in city of St. Pete. So that's his connection to St. Pete. He basically came back home His mom lives down there in St. Pete, and he was staying with her a little bit and staying at another address down there.
Do we know how many times Small actually fired?
So we can say definitively 4 times. And again, we don't know what he started with. I can tell you that there were 22 rounds left when we recovered the magazine. And we can say that he fired twice at the man in the yard, once at the food mart, and once at the officer that definitively that we know. Could he have fired more times? Yes, but again, this is what the investigation showing right now. So I can tell you definitively he fired 4 times.
And then if the officer fired back 13, he still justified.
Absolutely. He fired at 30 feet away. 30 feet away is pretty far, and given the circumstances when he saw him pop out there and he's firing, absolutely. Because when you're firing, when a guy has done what he did, shot into a car, shot some innocent guy out in his yard, turned a gun on the officer, fired at the officer, and he pops out, you're going to keep shooting until the target goes down, until the bad guy goes down, because you're shooting to kill him, because he tried to kill you. And so he just kept shooting and then when he saw, and this is where Officer Sousa really did a great job and had the wherewithal and his bearings and his presence to know and to realize, even though he's pumped and the adrenaline's flowing and he's doing it and he's, as we call it, closing the gap and moving that distance and going after the guy, but when he saw the gun drop down on the ground, and that's why he could see that he dropped the gun, is that's why he put the gun away in transition, but at the same time things were covered because Officer Johnson had his gun out just in case there was something else. So they had the proper cover and then the contact, and as far as I can see, they did a great job.
Where does the investigation go from here? Like, I know, Chief Howard, you said that you guys are also doing an investigation to see if the violated is your portion wrapped up.
Yeah, so we're doing what would be considered as the criminal portion of it, and that aspect of it, and then Chief Holloway and his agency will look at it from a policy, procedure, administrative standpoint. So we still have some work to do. One of the biggest things is trying to identify who owns that car, who was in that car, and what happened. We still have a few more people to talk to, but really the investigation is substantially complete except for that, it's not a complex case.
Forensic officers involved in this case, how long have they been on the force?
Officer Sousa's been on for about 10 years. The other officer, I don't know, but I can get that information. I know it's over 10 years, but I'll get it for you.
And the crime that sent Small to prison the first time you mentioned on the Pinellas Trail, armed robbery, was that a random crime as well, to innocent people on the Pinellas Trail?
Yeah, I believe it was. You'd have to look at it, but from what I understand from it, and I haven't spent a lot of time looking at that because it was 10 years ago, but it was 2 random people on the trail.
Sure, the 70-year, I know he wasn't hit, but the 70-year-old, how was he doing after all of this? I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, he's shaken up. I mean, he obviously concerned. He as he said, he's out minding his own business and he got yelled at. And next thing he knows that there's bullets whizzing by his head. So he ran into his house, and but he's fine. Concerned, obviously should be. Could have easily got killed. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.